May I have a motion, please, to return to the regular board meeting to public session? Thank you, Dr. Littman. Second, Ms. Kazmarek-Bogner, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. I call the regular board meeting to order. All board members are present. Ms. Pullen, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag?
Sorry.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Be advised that in the event of a fire emergency and an evacuation should be necessary, an alarm will sound. Please note all marked emergency exits and evacuate well away from the building. At this time, we request that everyone turn their cell phone and other electronic devices to silent. Thank you. Before we review the agenda, we need to amend our motion for heading into executive session. The motion that we made was to enter executive session to discuss a legal matter with our attorney and an employment matter relating to 2 employees. I'd like to amend that motion and ask for a motion to adjourn into executive session previously to discuss 2 legal matters and employment matters relating to several employees. May I have a motion for that amendment? Thank you, Dr. McCleary and Dr. Singh. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimously. Thank you. All right, and now we're going to review the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Thank you, Mrs. Beeger. Dr. Littman as well. Thank you. Is there any discussion on the agenda tonight? All right, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. Dr. Brown Hall, we will now turn it over to you for board acknowledgements.
Thank you very much, President Leatherborough. So tonight we continue with our school spotlight, highlighting the great work that goes on within our buildings. This month, our school spotlight focuses on Williamsville East and Williamsville North High School. Social emotional learning is one of the most important aspects to everyday life in our schools. At Williamsville East, faculty, staff, and administration have worked tirelessly to connect, build community, and create safe spaces for students. I'd like to welcome outstanding Principal Brian Swatland to share more on East Leading with Compassion initiative.
Hello, thank you, Dr. Brown Hall, Board of Education, welcome. Leading with Compassion. At East High School, we have implemented many initiatives this year that build on the district goal for student health and safety. The video that you'll watch depicts the great work of 3 of our teachers, Megan Schapp, Lisa Azzarelli Brown, and Carla Catalano. Our initiatives include SEL presentations to the faculty by Lisa and Carla. There have been a total of 2 presentations for 30 minutes each. We have a book study that is going on for an implementation team facilitated by Megan Schapp, which includes all members of the special education department, where they are creating lessons to share those out with the students and the faculty. The book is titled, What Happened to You? Sources of Strength is currently running a We Belong campaign where students fill out Post-it notes and post those onto the wall in the Commons. Our Challenge to Change is running a diversity campaign with puzzle pieces, which signify how we all fit together. Leading with Compassion helps all of us with connections to each other and to the building and the community, as well as understanding trauma. We do not know the extent of the trauma that our students, faculty, and staff have undergone due to COVID, but it is our goal to be sensitive to the needs of everyone in the building. So these are just a few examples of how we lead with compassion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As a parent in the school district, I am really proud to be a part of a district that is attending to in such an intentional way the whole student. All those parts, the social, the emotional, and the learning are what make a student. The support that I see from my colleagues, for students, is really reassuring and energizing as a professional.
We have a campaign going on right now through Sources of Strength, We Belong. There's a new display downstairs, I think it's in Student Street. Again, it's that sense of community, and it's sort of all through the building.
With students, you make that investment every day. It may not happen on day 2, it may not happen on day 3, but all of a sudden you're having a student who's sharing something that's really important to them, and they recognize you as a trusted adult, and that's where it's holy and beautiful.
We are living through this pandemic, and it's a shared event for all of us, but our students and our colleagues are all responding differently to what we're going through. And so I think it's really important to build on the fact that we're relational creatures and that we all need connection with others and that we need to be compassionate with our students and with our colleagues.
I think that there's been a huge shift. Now there are so many other layers of support for a student. So for example, if we have a student where we know there's, that is experiencing some difficulty, the guidance counselor is involved. We have a social worker that's involved. We have maybe a gen ed teacher that's involved, a special ed teacher, myself. So we have so much more support for that student.
We know from human experience that when people feel connected, they're able to thrive. And so for some students, it might mean that they can make it through a day. For others, it can mean that they can focus and they can be resilient and they know that they can get through something that might be challenging academically because they feel supported. And so when teachers are extending those moments of grace and acknowledgement of the student as a human, then we get a lot more academically from students. And I think that's really the exciting part about it, is that it is social, it is emotional, and it is learning, all those 3 pieces together that support each other.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Principal Swatland.
Thank you.
At Williamsville North, their motto is learning today, leading tomorrow. To help guide students on their educational journey and as they begin their college search or look for opportunities to join the workforce, North High School developed a space to help with this process. I'd like to welcome our hardworking principal, Bob Caniglio, to share more on North High School's Career Center.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Brown. Thank you, Board of Education. When we started at North, when I started there, I spoke with Carrie Ansel about our Career Center. And Carrie said to me that the previous years before I started, she was actually sitting in the LMC, the library, and kids had to whisper when they would talk one-on-one about their career and college choices. She then moved into a very small room that's adjacent to the library, and she would do presentations in the senior cafeteria when it was available. This year, with the amount of laptops and Chromebook carts we had, we were able to retrofit an attaching room to the library that tripled her space and gave her a room to have not only in-person and virtual visits, but several kids at a time, where they could talk about either careers, college recommendations, and life planning. She's been so overwhelmed with students, she's actually now to reach out to our business teachers and working with 9th and 10th graders, because these kids are now asking, how can we plan ahead, not just juniors and seniors? So she really has taken this room and made it her own, made it part of North, and really it's a welcoming place for anyone to practice either their searches for college or also what they want to do in the future. So everything in this video is going to show you what Carrie has done in our building.
Thank you.
Does anybody know what they want to do yet? Maybe like UB for dental school. Fantastic.
The secret is I have the best job in the district. I work with amazing students. I get to help them do positive things with their life, and I get to connect with them in ways that most people in the district don't.
The Career Center is comforting and a way to step back from my crazy, really stressful day and school and sit down and just focus on myself and focus on my future. The Career Center has truly been the best part of my day. It's truly the best thing that this school can really provide for students who are really, really confused about the future And it's a way to really sit down and relax and ask questions and feel comfortable.
So we felt that the Career Center needed its own dedicated space. Prior to my starting here at North, it was kind of housed in the library where students didn't have their own space to work. And Ms. Ansel worked with kids one-on-one, and they're in a library, so they have to whisper. And there are students that want to look at career opportunities, scholarships, college planning. So we needed a dedicated space. And we had a computer lab connected to the library that would probably triple the space. So we kind of refurbished it and refitted it to meet her needs in the Career Center. So there still are computers in there that students can use, but she opened up the rest of the space, which offers opportunities for students to do virtual college visits, in-person college visits, career assessments, working on scholarships or applications for college. And it really is more than tripled her capacity. And it's become a dedicated, safe space for students to do research their future.
I love to be able to help and to guide them and to answer questions and to make what can be so scary and overwhelming manageable, reasonable, understandable, and not intimidating.
I truly appreciate it. And I thank the district and Mrs. Ansel for helping me for my future and for everyday stress and for all the information they have provided me and for all the help that they've gave me.
Awesome. So I'll turn it back over to you, President Leatherborough.
Thank you. We had an opportunity to visit the Career Center recently, so that was really awesome to see that. Are there any board acknowledgements? Yes, Merrick Bubner.
Yes, I just noticed today, I was on the New York State PTA website, and they had a poster contest in honor of their 125th annual convention. There were 4 divisions for the contest, and 2 of the divisions were winners from our district. So I wanted to congratulate Navanish Goel from Country Parkway Elementary for the primary division, and Shariti Mulgund from Mill Middle School in the intermediate division.
Awesome.
That's really cool. Thank you. Anyone else from the board? Mrs. Van Sice.
I would just like to quickly say a thank you. Primarily, my child does go to Williamsville North, but Williamsville North just had their parent-teacher conferences. Love the option that you could have either attended in person or virtually. And it's amazing to see just how organized and well-run it is. The staff members just dedicating their time. It's wonderful. Why I still don't know my way around there, but there are students that help you. It's a really easy process, a great way, face-to-face. I chose the in-person, but I just commend the staff for working this extra time. And we all know that there's some heightened, anxiety and different things going on. So it was a really pleasant experience. So Mr. Coniglio, please let your staff know how grateful we are.
Awesome.
Thank you. Dr. Littman.
Yeah, I just wanted to recognize I did attend last month the North DECA installation of offices, new members. And I know that some of the other schools have also done that. And I just wanted to reiterate the importance of these co-curricular activities in business and in other areas in their help in developing future leaders in our community and in the business world, and the extra effort the teachers at all of the high schools do in these types of programs.
Thank you, Dr. Littman. All right, we were moving on to item 4, which is public expression. And I call on our parliamentarian, Ms. Kazmarek Bogner, to review our public expression format.
Welcome to all who've come to this regular board meeting. Although state law does not require us to hold a public comment period, we have chosen to do so because we believe it is crucial for us to hear from our community members about their concerns and issues. Having said that, please note that the board is here to listen. The public comment period is not designed to be a discussion. Accordingly, please do not expect the board to respond to your concerns and questions tonight. This is because we take your concerns seriously and want to have sufficient time to process and research the issues if need be. We will respond to you by email after our meeting or have the proper staff member get back to you at the appropriate time. Also, please be aware that under state and federal privacy laws and per our policy 1510, we are unable to entertain any comments related to employee personnel information or any topic that may disclose information about a particular student. On these matters, we would ask that you go through the appropriate administrative channels. Finally, we recognize that right now, our nation and our community are polarized on a number of issues. That said, we want our school board meetings to serve as an example to our students that both our school board and our community members can deal with controversial issues in a civil manner and demonstrate mutual respect. In that spirit, we will insist that all speakers and audience members maintain civility and respect for any divergent views that others possess. We ask that speakers please address their comments to the board directly rather than the audience. In the unlikely event the meeting shall become unruly, the board will recess the meeting and return once order is restored. The board will now entertain public comments for up to 30 minutes. Each individual speaker is allotted 3 minutes. You'll be signaled at 2.5 minutes so that you may conclude your remarks. Right now, after I call on you, please step up to the podium and state your name. Our first speaker this evening is Tim Terrell. Someday I'll get it right, Mr. Terrell.
That's all right. I'm sure I'll be back. All right. Well, thank you for having me again. Last month I was here with words of support for Dr. Brown Hall, speaking about masking, and that was really great. Today it's a little bit different, but we had an email exchange. Last month I had an email exchange with Dr. Brown Hall and the Board of Education regarding incorrect and misleading information on the district website page concerning COVID-19 vaccines. We tried to connect on the phone and we were both busy, so maybe we'll have a chance after this. In my email, I had 3 items of concern. Number 1, the status of available vaccines needed to be updated to use the proper terms of FDA approved or emergency use authorization. As it reads now, it's misleading at best. It says there are 3 COVID-19 vaccines available to individuals: Johnson & Johnson approved for individuals 18 plus, Moderna approved for individuals 18 plus, Pfizer approved for individuals 5 plus. Well, the issue here is the term approved has connotation in our culture, and it's FDA. The FDA is the agency that approves medications and stuff. So there's only 1 vaccine approved by the FDA currently. The rest are all emergency use authorized. So I recommended it reads like this, and I had links to all of the FDA source material that explains this. It should read Johnson & Johnson, currently emergency use authorized, 18 plus. Moderna, same, EUA, 18 plus. Pfizer, under community label, currently FDA approved for 16 plus. And Pfizer, EUA for individuals 5 to 15. So I recommended the district educate people and explain the difference between these 2 terms. It's really, really important. Number 3, I just recently found out in the email chain as I was doing the email, the formula for the dose for 5 to 11 actually had been modified. A lot of people out there are saying that it's the same formula. What's the big deal? It actually has a different formula, and the FDA webpage explains this. It says the vaccine authorized for use in children 5 to 11 includes different inactive ingredients compared to the vaccine that has been used under EUA for individuals 12 years of age and older that has been studied in clinical trials. So basically the formula that kids 5 to 11 are being exposed to is not approved. So the response I got was disheartening. Dr. Brown Hall said, I didn't want to keep you waiting or under the assumption there will be changes to the website based on the information you submitted. I truly understand the information you submitted was to be helpful, but it can be seen as an attempt to dissuade parents or individuals from having their children or themselves receive the vaccine. As leaders of the community, I believe it's your responsibility to provide correct and accurate information, especially when it pertains to the health and safety of the children that we put in your care. To refuse to correct the website leads me to believe that you're willfully and willingly complicit in a misinformation campaign. If I'm wrong, I look forward to seeing the website updated. Hopefully we can speak about this so I can come back next month and say that everything's all good. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker this evening is Terry King.
Good evening, Board. Dr. Brownhall. Thanks for having me tonight or allowing me to be able to address the Board. I have a few concerns that I'd like to address regarding the budget. I really appreciated Mr. Matursky's presentation last month, in which he really, I think, sounded an alarm bell for many of us to have to pay attention to. When we made the transfer for the capital fund, the loss reduction of $4.8 million from the capital fund, and I was curious because is there a plan to replace the money in the capital fund? But more importantly, as I began to think about this and I reviewed kind of his presentation, we also noticed that we had a loss of 284 students from the beginning of the calendar year. Now, the New York State funding reimbursement formula is based on our census count of students. How is that going to impact our current operating budget, especially in light of some of the cost and areas that we have to manage the school going up considerably with inflation? And are we really going to be in a deficit position? Because I fear that at this trajectory with the student loss formulas and the reimbursement and the movement of money that we took from the capital fund, we're really going to be looking at a deficit. And I'd like to really know mid-year if that's really going to be happening, because that's going to have a serious impact on the new budget for 2022. Then the next question that comes up in the presentation was that we're actually looking at doing some additional capital expenditures with an air conditioning. But really, what is the master plan to maintain the reserve fund, the capital fund, in light of some of those projects, especially when they require matching money on a local level? And if the matching money comes from a local level, from operating, tax base, or formula from state reimbursements, again, are we facing a loss? And then the next question is, what will be the exposure of the new contract budget with the union? How will that impact the budget going into the spring of 2022? So I say that I think that this is an opportunity that the board can take a hard look and begin to really take a mid-year look at our fiscal ability to complete the year solvent, or are we going to be facing a deficit? And if so, what's the plan of action to correct that and address it? And then the next question is, do we still have the CARES Act money that was deferred, the $6.571 million that was delayed, as well as the American Rescue money, because we originally in the 2021 budget deferred that for 2022-23? Or has that been spent? I just question that, and I think it's a good time for the board to take a hard look. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And that concludes public expression for this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Kazmarek-Bogner, and thank you to all of our speakers. Dr. Lemon, we have a policy that we revise, so speakers have to sign up ahead of the meeting. Okay, and I think you voted for that policy. We're going to move on to our next item, which is our presentation on enrollment projections and the impact on open enrollment. Dr. Brownhall, I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, President Leatherborough. Our Assistant Superintendent, Mr. Scanzuzo, will be introducing Dr. Grossman from the RED Group.
Good evening, Dr. Brownhall, Board of Education members. I'd just like to take this time to introduce from Penfield, New York, Dr. Stephen Grossman, who represents the Research, Evaluation, and Development Group, also known as the RED Group, to provide us with a detailed presentation on future enrollment projections. Dr. Grossman.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here again this year. You should be seeing the PowerPoint slides. I don't see them on my, oh, here we go. And there it is. Okay, so I'm going to prompt Nicholas to move the slides along. So it might be a little clumsy, but we'll figure it out. Each year we've been doing these enrollment projections for Williamsville, And this year we pushed it back because we had some questions that we researched. And now we're ready to present our projections for next year and 5 years and stretching out 10 years. So we'll do it. And I'm sensitive to your time constraints, so I'll try to make it brief, but I'll be willing to answer questions at the conclusion. So we'll go to the next slide. I'm just going to assume, unless I hear differently, that you can hear me okay. All right. So enrollment factors that we look at every year are changes in the kindergarten class size, the current enrollment, migration of students in and out of the district, the number of resident school-age children in private parochial, home, and charter schools, the number of students in out-of-district programs or incarcerated, high school leavers, and then the last one doesn't deal with students so as much as factors that would impact some of the items above, the economy. And that we look at housing patterns primarily and employment, because a lot of districts have families move out because of downturns in the economy. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So we find that in Williamsville, over the past many years, changes in kindergarten class size, the current students in district, and migration of students primarily into the district during the school year have been the major factors. In the past year, we've experienced something that I don't think anybody could have possibly ever anticipated, and that's the ongoing pandemic and its effect on enrollments. So we'll go to the next slide, please. Okay. So what we're going to look at, as we have each year, is the past, present, and future of K-12, elementary, middle schools, high schools, and then we do a little summary and conclusions that we glean from the data. Now, if you want more detail, of course, you have a very detailed report which outlines the projections for each school and and grade level, so it gives you a lot of detail. But we won't do that tonight. Next. So we start, of course, with the kindergarten. And how do we figure out what next year's kindergarten is going to be? Well, we try to be as close as we can by using what we call a correlation with the live births in the district 5 years previous. And as you can see from the graph, and we go back all the way to 2002, 2007, that is 2002 births affecting 2007 enrollments, that there is a fairly strong correlation between the trends of the live births and the trends of the kindergarten enrollments, and the percentage difference varies from 112% to about 118% over time, so that we take a kind of an average of that, and I also cut it back a little bit because of the pandemic effect with kids coming into the district during that 5-year period. And the red numbers, 680 and 685, are what we're using to project forward based on the historical trends. So we only project 2 years ahead, and then in the projections, we use those as just a baseline to continue forward, because those classes then stay in the district for the kindergarten class moves through for 13 years, not the same students necessarily, but the class. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. We also have to look at who's in the school district as of October of 2021. And this was the BEDS report, the Basic Educational Data System report, that the district submitted. And it's a snapshot in time, because as soon as you put it in, somebody's moved in, somebody's moved out. But overall, this is what the classes look like as you started the school year. And you can clearly see that you've got some classes in the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade that are significantly larger than the kindergarten through 4th grades. So those will have an effect in terms of attrition as time goes on. And this is not new. This is what's been happening for quite some time. And we'll go to the next slide. So as I did the projections in 2019, I clearly missed something when I didn't realize there was going to be a pandemic in 2020. And what happened there was that students, parents, pulled them out for homeschooling and sent them to programs in the community that were having students come to school. And it impacted the enrollments by a factor of about 3 or 4%, as fewer new students came into the district and more students transferred into non-public options. This year, we did not see a continuation of that. We didn't see a return of the 200 or so students that left, but we did see a stabilization. So we'll go into what that did in a few slides. Next slide. Okay, so we have to make assumptions when we do research, and one of our assumptions is that kindergartens will be smaller than 12th grades, and that's not probably a stretch. Migration will offset some attrition. That's been true up until the pandemic, but now it's true again. The economy will recover, and we had been coming out of the recession and looking at good times ahead until the pandemic hit. So now we have to recover from that, and other factors will stay stable rather, and that has been the case. So moving on, next slide. So a 5-year history of our K-12 enrollments show, and that's K-12, it does not include pre-K students that are in the buildings. It shows that we've lost 450 students over the past 5 years in K-12. Next slide. What we're projected K-12 enrollments is that we will continue to lose about another 117 students over the next 5 years over all the grade levels. Okay, next slide. Now that breaks out differently for the different grade levels. The 5-year history of elementary schools has been a slight increase or stabilization as the larger 4th grades did move out, and now there's some parity between the 4th grades and the kindergarten, and you have students moving into the district in the K-4 area. So we haven't had any loss over the last 5 years, and projected in slide 12. We project that we will continue the stable state. 34 is within the margin of error for this size sample. So, we're pretty much not looking, as long as we don't see anything unusual in the live birth numbers, we're looking at pretty stable projections for the K-4. 13, please. Thank you. The middle school, we did lose quite a few over the last 5 years, about 292 students. And that's due to some really big classes moving out and the smaller classes moving in. Next slide. But what's going to happen now is it'll stabilize, because now your 8th grades moving out aren't going to be that much smaller or that much larger than the 5th grades moving in, and you'll have students moving into the grades filtering in as the years go by. And then the next slide. Okay, the 5-year high school history has been a loss of 206 students on a base of 3,368. And that's to be expected, because we had some pretty large, in fact, when I first started, it was concerns about the capacity of the high schools. But that concern waned as enrollments started to decrease. But you had some really large classes leave and smaller eighth grades moving into ninth grade. And then the next slide. And then we foresee that next year and beyond, you'll lose another 220 on a base of about 3,100 until that levels out. And so we're looking at a leveling out, as the chart of K-12 showed, overall the grade levels, barring any unusual things happening in the district. So 17. So what we see then is, if you look at the slide, and obviously not going to read all the numbers, but if you go from current to next year to 2006-07 projection, you see some pretty similar numbers moving ahead. A little bit of loss in the high school area, but otherwise pretty close to what is there now. And so the implications based on this is that the current enrollments over the next 5 years shouldn't have any impact on current attendance areas or current feeder patterns in terms of building capacity or for any other reason other than if the district wanted to do something different for some reason. But the enrollments themselves are not going to cause any disruption in buildings and so on. Next slide. So we're at the conclusion point. K-12 enrollments will level out as follows: small increases in elementary and middle, and decreases at the high school level next 5 years. No changes in attendance areas or feeder patterns will be necessary because of enrollments. No major changes in facilities will be necessary because of enrollments. There may be for other reasons, but not because of enrollments. And the pandemic will continue to have a negative effect on local economy and ability of families to move into the district. Having said that, it seems to me that we're coming out of this, and the next few years, we should be, the pandemic should be less and less of a concern, both economically and in terms of enrollments. And probably you'll have a pent-up demand. You may see some additional families moving into the district as it's more feasible to do so and the economy improves. Next slide. And that's the thank you slide. And I'd certainly be willing to field questions if you have any.
Thank you, Dr. Grossman. Are you able to hear us?
I can.
Okay, wonderful. I'm going to see, I'll start on my left and then go down the table to see if there's questions from the board, starting with Dr. Lippman.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I just had 2 points. One is on slide 17, where you mentioned that Heim Elementary and Maple East Elementary would see somewhat of a much larger increase than others. And I just want to know what drew you to that point. And it might tie into the conclusion. Well, I don't know if it does. I'll bring up one of the conclusion points after that.
Yes, all the trends there that are shown there are based on the cohort survival ratios being brought into the chart and projected forward. And I'm not sure why Heim has more kids moving into it than the others, but that's what drives that increase. Both the existing classes and then the ratios from year to year over the 5 years of kids moving into the school. It's not a huge amount, but it's significant. I agree.
And thank you for that insight. The second goes with the conclusion about people maybe not moving into the district at a higher rate. In my perspective, I believe in Williamsville, the real estate market is reasonably strong. As I drive around, I see more new buildings going on. Properties in my neighborhood sell in a few days or less. So,
right.
And I don't know if you have that answer because none of us are real estate gurus at all, but I think the conclusion that real estate prices or housing may keep some people out. We'll have to see if that, as we talk next year, if that follows along, or if we do get migration of new people into our district.
I'm pretty confident that if things progress and get better, you will have some more in-migration of families with school-age children. But the last couple of years, it's been a little difficult because the housing stocks and the lack of new construction and the supply chain and all that, has affected it. So hopefully, not to mention cost, in the bidding wars for the existing houses and so on. So, that'll remain to be seen. And people are getting older. Nobody's getting younger. So there will be more folks of my generation saying, well, I think we're going to move to North Carolina or someplace warmer and retire there. So, yeah, it's a flexible variable for sure.
Thank you so much.
Also, my left, Mrs. Beaver.
I'm the representative for Heim Elementary, and over the last year or two, a number of parents have come to the meetings with concerns about construction in the area and how the addition of single-family homes, other structures may be impacting student population. So I'm not surprised at all to see the Heim Elementary numbers proposed to increase in the way they are. And I was curious if, when you mentioned migration, if construction projects had to do with those numbers, but seeing the 5-year future look, it's concerning to see just how much Heim Elementary looks a little different than the other schools. My question really is more on the district level of how do we as a district take these enrollment projections and then use this as a tool when we are preparing for our budget. And the reason that I ask that is because another concern coming out of Heim Elementary has been class size, particularly in the 3rd and 4th grade classrooms, that they're larger and those classrooms are smaller. And if we are expecting an additional 30 students, where do we go from there? So I'm just hoping that our district is looking at this, being proactive, and I'm curious what those next steps will be.
Right. And I'll say that's exactly why this is so beneficial and that the district does it every year, because not only is it used for staffing, it's used for long range planning also as to what it will look like in the schools. And that's why we pay such close attention to it and try to develop in our minds what needs to happen. Do we need to find additional space in the school? Do we need to reallocate some spaces in the school building? So all of those are being thought of by the entire leadership team when we look at these numbers, but we do take these into consideration when we do our planning every year.
Really great to hear. Thank you very much.
Any other questions on my left? On my right, Vice President Van Sice.
Kind of along the lines that Mrs. Beeger said, I know you said that, of course, you were not able to predict, as no one did, impact that COVID had, and it was a 3 to 4%. You didn't see that return this year. I'm wondering if in your projections, you were factoring in the potential, because I believe COVID has still impacted some family decisions where there are still families that are homeschooling, maybe doing non-pub still. So were you able to look at the projection potentially of students returning, or was that not something that was factored in?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that has to be thought about because there are a lot of students in non-public and homeschool, not so many, but in the universe of non-public, if they all decided to come back tomorrow, it'd be a problem. But it's very, very unlikely. So I did not factor in specifically those homeschool children. It was about 160 difference. But I also felt, well, what I did was I did factor in an in-migration ratio as we move forward, and that's why the enrollments don't go down exactly as the difference between the kindergartens and the 12th grades, if you follow me. We've got factored in that there's going to be students moving into the district continuously, or students moving from homeschooling, for example, into the regular classes. It's just virtually impossible to predict, exactly how many that's going to be. But given the numbers, it shouldn't have a major impact because it's spread out over 12 grades. Although most of it, I will say, is like, K6.
Right.
But it's spread out over all those grades. So you have 20 over 6 schools or 30 over 6 schools.
So
but
that's
yeah,
where it is.
I reduced some of the assumptions relative to the number of students that'll be moving into the district, the net increase from students moving into the district based on the history and what's been happening. But, you're well below capacity at this point, given the building and the building's capacities and the numbers you actually have.
Okay, thank you. So that was my concern too, the migration piece, because while we all drive around the community, there's 2 brand new developments going up that I think will impact Dodge Casey and the Hines. So I was a little bit shocked to see that actually Dodge's numbers will go down, but then the unpredictable return of students or not, it's going to really be this game of trying to really balance and make sure
Right.
that our class sizing and our staffing is all
And
right.
just to reassure you, we've been other than the pandemic year, we've been able to be very accurate for next year. And then, if you go back and look at the accuracy over the period of time we've been doing this, we're fairly accurate. If anything, we've overestimated the numbers going back, where you go out 10 years, because we've actually been doing it long enough to look at what did we predict 10 years ago. And it's not too bad, but the accuracy for next year from last year is like, 5% or something. So it's pretty good. It's in the report in the appendix.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions on my right? Okay, thank you, Dr. Grossman. I just had one follow-up question. I think most of the board members hit on everything. In the attached report, under the section of methodology, you list the factors that affect the enrollment trends. And towards the bottom of that page, you mentioned that the town of Amherst planning department assisted with us. So does the town of Amherst actually give you information on like how many new homes they're building? Is that part of this?
They used to, but my contact there, Mr. Black, retired. Now I go to a chart of sales that they have, and I've done an analysis of that. And just what's selling, how many houses have sold, where they are, and what they're what they're likely to generate. So I've been using that. So they've been very helpful, as I think they can be.
Okay, thank you. So just for clarification, that piece of it you're basing off of homes that are already existing that have been sold.
Right. Homes that are under construction could take 3 years before they actually send kids to, before they're finished and sold and everything. And homes that are permitted, it could take 4 years before they get all the permissions and all the approvals and things. So they have a lag, especially in permitting. They have a lag between the time that they apply for a permit and the time they actually sell the property.
Okay.
It's quite a long lag.
Makes sense. And I guess my last question, Dr. Brownhall, would be for you, because later in our meeting, I think it's in part under the president's report, perhaps, or in section 10, we're going to be asked to vote on open enrollment. And, I do see that Dodge is expected to go up by like 20 students next year, but then significantly drop off. And I also know that board members have asked some questions about now that we have enrollment data, the other piece of that puzzle was sort of like building capacity.
Mhm.
And when we're talking about building capacity, we don't just mean like fire code, but we mean like capacity for being advantageous for student learning.
Mhm.
So, it used to be that the decision to open enroll, a parent had to notify the district pretty early. I don't know if it was January or February. Forgive me, I forget.
It was
February, but I know that we've moved that since, and it's now later.
Correct.
It's in June. It's June 1st. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. So, is there any repercussion, any negative, repercussion or consequence if we were to table the vote that was recommended to us later in the meeting for the open enrollment authorization?
No, there wouldn't be any repercussions. We can still do that in January, and that would still allow enough time for parents to indicate, if they're choose to open enroll, because we do have that additional time, and then we can actually look at capacity and other things that the board has questioned.
Okay, yeah, I mean, when we get to that point, board members, I'm going to call upon you for your guidance on that, because I am interested in sort of the rationale of why we are continuing to offer open enrollment for elementary, other than what I noticed are two schools that also house some of our self-contained classrooms. But perhaps we want to think about maybe just offering a sibling preference option for those families instead of just
Open enrollment.
Open enrollment.
Got it.
I just really want to be under the belief, and I am under the belief, that all of our elementary schools provide amazing learning opportunities.
Absolutely.
And, we're trying to eliminate a culture where we're competing with one another and foster a culture of support and belonging.
Absolutely.
So that's something for the board's consideration when we get to that point. I know he's off of our Zoom call, but he's still here. Okay, Dr. Grossman, I just want to thank you. There you are. Now I can see you. Thank you
Yes,
very much
thank
for
you.
answering our questions and for the detailed report, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Grossman.
Okay.
All right.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you.
And thank you, Assistant Superintendent Scanzuzo, for ensuring that this report gets done every year. So thank you very much.
Yeah, it's interesting. And even the attachment that, with all of the detailed information of how it comes to the findings, I find that fascinating.
So I also found it interesting in that attached report that he indicated a lot of the in-migration was from international families, and just like that will have a different kind of an impact on us
He did
going
indicate
forward.
that would increase. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's more than just the PowerPoint. There's a whole nother attachment that's available for the community, that if anyone's watching this video, and that's all available on our board docs.
Very thorough.
Yeah, very thorough. Yes.
Yeah.
All right, board members, are we ready to move on to our consent agenda? Thank you. So moving on, may I have a motion to approve consent agenda items 6, 7, and 8, please? Thank you, Mrs. Beeger. And second, Ms. Poulin. Is there any discussion? I just want to thank, after we vote, thank the Williamsville Education Foundation for their mini grant donation of nearly $8,700, which will be used to fund 19 projects that support student learning throughout our district. And the Williamsville Education Foundation does raise most of its money through its Wall of Fame breakfast. I know we haven't been able to do that for a few years due to the pandemic, but we are looking forward to the return of that event in the fall of 2022, I believe. And I am the liaison for the Williamsville Education Foundation as well. So I will follow up with a letter of thank you to Mr. Schubert, who is their president right now. All right, so if there's no other questions or comments, all in favor on items 6, 7, and 8? Okay, opposed? Abstention? Motion carries unanimously. The Board of Education extends best wishes and gratitude to the following retirees for their service to the district. Linda Gowans, who works at district office for 15 years of service, and Margaret Singleton at High Middle School for 14 years of service. Thank you very much. All right, let me put that on our agenda. All right, we are on item 9. Is there a motion, please, to approve the November 9th board meeting minutes? Thank you, Ms. Kazmierzak-Bogner. Second was Ms. Beeger. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of approval? All hands up equals motion carries unanimously. We are now on our president's report. Okay, our conversations with staff event is coming up in January. Earlier this year, we agreed to set aside 3 dates throughout the year where we would make ourselves available to district employees so that we can encourage open communication and engagement. We are supposed to be going to South High School on January 27th. I wanted to ask the board what they thought about moving our start time from 3:30 to 3 o'clock, only because we did notice that we were sort of standing around waiting for people to come in. I know one board member has expressed that they will be, might have to be late because they'd be coming from work. But I do feel like that would still be okay because we don't all have to be there the full time. And I just want to make sure when we're scheduling this, we're scheduling it for what's most convenient for our staff so that we are thinking about their availability. Like, we don't want an elementary teacher to have to wait around for an hour before they come to see us. So is there any feedback on that? Anyone want to say yay or nay, one or the other?
It makes sense. We start at 3 for those who can be there at 3. That will be probably more helpful to those employees that would be willing to get there. I think it's a great idea.
All right, and just to get it on the record then, can I have a motion to move the start time for our January 27th event to 3 o'clock? And so we would have it go from 3 to 4:30. Thank you, Mrs. Van Cise and Ms. Kazmierzak-Bogner. All in favor of that? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. So Mr. Filipowski will get that changed so that staff know that we'll start at 3 instead of 3:30. All right. There is going to be a virtual event hosted by New York State Education Department on the review of graduation measures in New York State. This virtual event will take place on January 27th. Is that the same date?
Yes.
It is the same
It
date.
is.
Okay, well, that's going to make it difficult for any of us to attend that. But it does start at 2 o'clock. If anyone does want to catch the first 45 minutes or so, you can just notify Mrs. Carey and she will register you for that event. We do have a community forum in the spring. Yes, Ms. Kazmierzak-Bogner.
Oh, I just wanted to mention that with most of the NICEAD events, as long as you register, you can watch the video after the fact. So we could still register for the event and see the video even.
I am registered for that already, and I will need to attend that.
Okay, I understand.
Part of my professional job.
Absolutely. No, I get it. But it's good to know because, you know, if we want the information just to register, then you get it afterwards. Thank you for that. Our community forum is scheduled for March 22nd after the budget work session. So that will be here. And last year we were on Zoom for that, but we will have to discuss, what's the board's feel on that, because we might be able to do it in person.
And I think because it's March 22nd and more than 3 months away, we might want to wait to make a decision on whether it be virtual or in person.
It's true. We're living in a time where things change every week, right?
Every week, absolutely.
Okay, that's a good call on that one. Under school visits, we did visit Forest, Transit Middle, and South High School on November 16th. There's a report in board docs on that. And January 20th is the next school visit date, and that's for East, Mill and Country Parkway. I usually do attend, but I'm not able to attend that one because it's a Thursday and I have a prior commitment on Thursdays. Can I ask who's available from the board? Okay, we got lots of hands. So Dr. Lippman, Ms. Poland, Ms. Seeger, and Ms. Kazmarek-Bogner, and possibly Mr. Viscalia.
Dr. Singh has his.
Oh, and Dr. Singh has his hand up too. And that was a yes? Awesome. So we've got 4, 5, 5, possibly 6. So that would be wonderful. And Ms. Kazmarek-Bogner, you offered to write the report. I know.
Right, I just wanted to confirm that I will attend and I will write the liaison report
Thank
in
you
your absence.
so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, so now we're looking at the Erie County Association of School Board items. Item B, the legislative breakfast was held on Saturday, November 13th. Dr. Singh and Dr. Brown Hall attended this event. Dr. Singh, thank you for the report you submitted. Do either of you gentlemen wish to add anything about that event?
Nope.
Okay. So at the legislative breakfast, several districts spoke about being in favor of and supporting the Test to Stay initiative. Senator Ed Rath sent a letter to Governor Hochul urging the New York State Department of Health to develop guidelines for students for the Test to Stay program. And in addition to Senator Rath signing that letter, Assemblyman Michael Norris from the 144th District, which he serves like a small portion of Williamsville, which is why I'm naming him, he also signed on to that letter. So I'm just bringing that to your attention because at your spot there are thank you postcards, and if you are interested in writing a letter of thank you, just a quick note, like just a couple sentences, you could address that to either Senator Ed Rath or Assemblyman Michael Norris, thanking them for signing on to the Test to Stay letter. And you don't have to fill out the address. If you just put their name, Mrs. Carey can address them for us and put on the postage. The other option for those postcards is we did have some of our legislators attend the legislative breakfast. And let's see, I know Assemblywoman Wallace was there, Assemblywoman McMahon, and Senator Ed Rath.
Correct.
So if you also wish to use the card for that purpose, we also have like a stack of like a gazillion cards. We're not short on thank you cards. But please know that I'm the legislative liaison, and a big part of the work is about building relationships. And you don't just go to people when you want something, you also go to them when you want to thank them.
Right.
And that's part of just being a good partner and being in a relationship. So please consider using that thank you card before you leave today after we adjourn. Any questions on that? All right. That leads into the legislative team meeting, which was held on November 18th. I do have the report in board docs, and it was at that legislative team meeting that we were encouraged to go back to our boards and speak about using the postcards. And we are fortunate because our district has a tab on its website that has all of the advocacy information with all of the contact info and addresses. The speedboarding event was held on December 2nd. Dr. McCleary and Dr. Singh attended. Dr. McCleary or Dr. Singh, either of you wish to add anything about speedboarding? I did read your report.
No, I think I had it all in there in the report.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And our upcoming meetings for Erie County Association of School Boards are listed in board docs. Does anyone have anything they want to add about ECASB? Okay, thank you. Item C, the New York State School Board Association. There was a free virtual legislative and state budget webinar that was on December 9th. I was planning on attending. I think Mr. Matursky was planning on attending too. There was some login issues. I ended up getting the link sent to me after the meeting had concluded. So I didn't attend, but I did see that they're going to be sending out the information, and they have sent us the legislative priorities already from NISBA, so I was able to see that as well. And I believe all of you received the NISBA email, so you should get that information as well. Does anyone have anything else to report on New York State School Board Association? All right. So now we're going on to the review, our mid-year review of our district policies. Oh, actually, no, we got one more thing to do first. The Policy Review Committee, and we've had 3 different committees ongoing for a series of 1,000s, 2,000, and 3,000s, have been meeting or have met, and will be submitting updates in agenda item 11E. So you'll see some of the, when we do our first readings of board policies, you'll see some of the proposed policy changes for all the bylaws today. Further updates will be on the January agenda, and the 3,000 policy committee will be meeting again on January 4th. And then I figured at our January meeting, we can discuss what we want our next steps to be, because as each committee concludes their work, then we can go on to, starting new work with the 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, all the way through 8,000. Does anyone on any of the policy review committees want to add anything or say anything about the work that's been ongoing? Great, thank you. So now we're looking at our progress report of the board goals implementation plans. So at our August 10th meeting, we developed and approved our 2021-2022 board goals. And a board member volunteered and committed to monitoring one of the approved goals for each area. And we're going to be sharing out on that progress at this time. So thank you for pulling that up, Mr. Filipowski. So up on the screen, you will see the first goal, which is student learning. And that was one that I took responsibility for monitoring. So I just want to share a couple of things about the student learning and academic achievement goal. I'm not going to read it off the screen to you, but just point out a few things I'm impressed. So earlier this year, during a committee of the whole discussion that was actually initiated by Dr. Singh, Assistant Superintendent Beelan recommended to us as board members that we use this academic year as a baseline for our student achievement data. Am I stating that correctly, Dr. Beelan? Thank you. Okay. Because I know there were some questions about, why aren't we examining data? And you gave a very thorough explanation for those who didn't know about Regents exams being pretty much optional, so therefore it not being a very accurate data point. So therefore, when you're looking at the progress monitoring that I did, let me just pull up that for myself too. You can see that for the first row, I included reports that speak to how the board monitors the work of the district with respect to curriculum and instruction, specifically the support of the district goals. Because I think that that's really centered to our work as a board, is that, we approve and adopt the district goals, and so we have to then follow that up and sort of put our money where our mouth is and then support their work, because that's the only way that work can be completed. And let's see, the review of that work is going to take place at the January meeting. So next month, when we meet in the new year, our assistant superintendents will share out on the different areas of our district goals. For the remaining rows, I shared evidence by noting the date of the board meeting and the agenda item where the action occurred. I want to point out that a little something about the mathematics update. I know prior to the start of the pandemic, going back to 2019, achievement in mathematics, specifically, at the high school level was an area of focus for the board. And we had asked our superintendent at that time to examine that area more closely. And Dr. Beelan came back with some recommendations and supports. And COVID hit, right? And everything was sort of put on pause. But now here in the present, supports were shared with us, and we did receive an update this fall on the math learning labs. And I believe that was our September meeting. And as a board, we approved the funding for those positions. So I would just like to ask Dr. Brown Hall that we continue to monitor that area. Perhaps in a few months, receive another update just on how that's being implemented. I know when we did a visit at North back in November, it was just kind of starting to get set up. And then when we visited South, we actually got to see one of the rooms. We could see that there was definite progress. But I'm also specifically interested in making sure that our students are aware of, what's this math learning lab about? How do I access it? Because by the high school level, we're trying to teach our kids to self-advocate. And I'm a mom of a high school kid, and just questioning our friends, there didn't seem to be a lot of knowledge about it. So that's just something I'd like to just keep on our radar as we monitor our work. And then just also one last thing, when I looked at the work I submitted with a fresh set of eyes today, I realized I neglected to include the evidence around our STEAM rooms. And that's something I think is really important for everything that STEAM stands for, right? The science, technology, engineering, arts, and is it math or music? Math, thank you. And so Mrs. Carey, I will send an update to this chart to include information on our STEAM labs, because it is a new learning opportunity this year in Williamsville. And it's another area where we as a board approved the funding for our STEAM teachers. Does anyone have any other questions about any of the work or progress? We've had some excellent recognition too in the third column about celebrating achievements. I think that's been some really nice things that have shown out even tonight when we saw evidence about the Career Center. All right, so now I'm going to call on the board members for each section going forward. So our next section on student health and safety is for Dr. Littman. So Dr. Littman, I'll turn it over to you.
I first want to thank President Leatherbarrow and Mrs. Carey for their assistance in all of this. And just to reiterate what you see there, I'll just go over some of the highlights. Again, the goal of the Board of Education to prioritize the resources necessary to support the physical, mental, social, and emotional health and safety of students throughout this academic school year. To do that, the action is to review, update, and approve district policy related to student health and safety. In August, we approved the DASA district building coordinators. We adopted the district safety plan. And ongoing at each meeting, we receive reports from our superintendent, Dr. Brown Hall, in September about reopening and transportation and health and safety. In October, about school health and safety and staffing issues. November, health and safety. We'll learn later today what December will bring to us. Again, issues with COVID and the guidance we receive on an ongoing basis and our responses, as well as school nutrition and fitness report. The second action is to advocate for the resources necessary to support all of these endeavors while promoting diversity, inclusion, and belonging for all of our students. We did appoint Dr. Singh as our board liaison to the Wellness Committee. We do receive reports. We also, during the Fall Community Forum, interacted with parents about mental health concerns, interactions and our advocacy that many of you are involved in through the Erie County School Board and the New York State School Board Association. And the last on the agenda is something on today's talking about a resolution for the Test to Stay program. So again, thank you for the contributions of everyone. It's appreciated.
Thank you, Dr. Littman. Any questions or comments or feedback for that goal? All right, seeing none. Dr. McCleary, I call on you for our goal of board district being
Thank you, Mrs. Leatherbarrow. Our first goal is to serve as liaisons. And so basically all board members have written reports from their meetings and have presented them and attended the meetings that they are assigned and so forth. And of course, the superintendent has presented weekly videos and Board of Education updates that have been very thorough and very helpful. The second goal is talking about holding forums, and we did have one, and their upcoming dates are listed for our various budget and other community forums. The third goal talks about visiting schools, and we do visit the schools regularly. We've already had some opportunities to go into the schools, and we will continue to do that until we have been able, hopefully, to see all of our district schools. And the fourth goal talks about sending correspondence to the community, since this particular topic deals with the umbrella of the community. And President Leatherbarrow has done an excellent job of responding to the emails and questions that have come in from the community. That's that goal.
Thank you very much. And I'm just seeing Mrs. Carey in that fourth column. Just there's a typo with the word members. They're not embers. We're not setting anyone on fire.
Yeah. Yes. Members.
Not yet. Okay, so budget development and fiscal oversight, Mrs. Kazmarek-Bogner.
Thank you, President Leatherbarrow. For our budget development and fiscal oversight goal, I actually, when I review the agenda every month for our meeting, I actually note any progress or any items that are related to it as I review the agenda. So on my measures, you'll see the date and item numbers that correspond to each of the various actions. For the first action, that relates to our facility and capital improvements. This fall, the music project was completed. We're currently monitoring the security improvement and infrastructure project, which is scheduled to begin in the spring and summer of 2022, as well as looking at a potential district-wide air conditioning project, which, if approved by the board, will be voted on by the community at the May 17th, 2022 annual district vote. The second action is monitoring our expenditures and revenues for the current school year, which we do monthly through approval of our consent agenda items and also our finance items. So I've noted those that we've done so far this year on action 2. The third action is overseeing next year's budget development. And fourth is providing opportunities for the community to review budget development and provide input. In October, we approved our budget calendar, which outlines the process. And last month, Mr. Matersi provided the historical budget presentation, which is sort of the starting point as we move forward in the budget development process. And these documents are both available for the community to view in board docs. And then the fifth action is when the board adopts the 2022-23 proposed budget, which should happen on April 19th, 2022. So there's been no progress on that fifth action at this point. And that's all I have, unless there's questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kazmarek-Bogner. And our next goal, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Dr. Singh, I turn it over to you.
In the diversity, equity, and inclusion, we have 2 action items, and most of us can see what's there. And we started out the year with a great presentation by Dr. Brownhall in September. And I'm really excited to hear about the formation of the diversity committee and hiring of a diversity coordinator in our district very soon. And we appointed DASA coordinators for all schools earlier this year in October. And we actually approved 3 new policies related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think that's a first for our school district, and that's something very exciting. And we also approved amended code of conduct for our school district, and I think it'll be going back to the wellness committee for an update for 2022. And Dr. Brownhall informed us that he will be giving us an update in January about what's going on with the diversity committee, and we're very looking forward to hearing that. In addition to that, a few of our board members, we attended presentations on diversity by NISBA. And I attended one and I found it very informative. So
good.
Thanks for that. And in our second action item, we will continue to monitor the status of the district DEI committee. And that's what we'll be hearing in January. And we have, once the committee is formed, we'll have a liaison for the committee as well. 3 of our board members serve on the strategic planning committee, where diversity is one of the main topics of conversation and discussion.
Mhm.
And I think this year the board appointed me as a liaison for the district wellness committee as well,
Right.
where I think diversity will also be discussed.
Awesome.
So that kind of concludes the diversity part.
Thank you, Dr. Singh, and thank you to all the board members that took on the responsibility for monitoring one of the goals. It's, pretty powerful when you look at all the work that has been completed this far, and we're only halfway through the year. All right, so that brings us to item F of my president's report, and then I promise I'll be done. Let's grab that item. Okay. So at our last board meeting, we had speakers who spoke about the hindrances of excluding children from attending school when they are deemed a close contact to a COVID-19 positive individual and required to quarantine if they're unvaccinated. Also, within the last month, Erie County began a Test to Stay pilot program and chose Grand Island schools to implement that pilot. Through advocacy efforts with our partnership with Erie County Association of School Boards, it was shared that a few school districts around Western New York approved board resolutions in support of a Test to Stay option for all students who are unvaccinated. When ECASB shared this information with us, several members of our board expressed interest in passing a similar resolution. So at this time, I'm going to ask Board Parliamentarian Kazmarek Bogner to read the proposed resolution, which is available for public viewing in board docs. There will be an opportunity for board discussion or comments before we vote on the resolution. And then if the resolution passes, I just want to ask board members to remember to come over to see me to sign it. I have it in front of me to sign it before you leave tonight. Okay? So at this time, Ms. Kazmarek Bogner, I call on you to read the resolution.
Thank you, President Leatherbarrow. Whereas Williamsville Central School District is the largest suburban school district in Western New York, serving approximately 9,500 students, and whereas Williamsville Central School District is consistently ranked as one of the top school districts in Western New York by independent sources that evaluate student performance data annually, and whereas the future well-being of the Williamsville Central School District community relies on providing all students access to high-quality education, and whereas the district is following the health and safety guidance set forth by the Erie County Department of Health with respect to masking, social distancing, hand sanitizing stations, and daily school cleaning and disinfecting, and whereas The district and Board of Education supports vaccination against COVID-19 and encourages students and staff to become fully vaccinated and receive a booster dose when eligible, even providing on-site vaccination opportunities to children and parents. And whereas the Williamsville Central School District recognizes that healthy, unvaccinated students that are identified as close contacts of an individual who tests positive for COVID-19 are required to quarantine under the New York State Department of Health regulations and/or guidance. And whereas the pilot program of Test to Stay in Grand Island has begun successfully with students testing negative on a daily basis and able to remain in school for learning and socialization. Now, therefore, be it resolved, effective December 14th, 2021, the Williamsville Central School District Board of Education supports and encourages the Erie County Department of Health to expand the Test to Stay mitigation program that allows unvaccinated students to avoid school exclusion by testing negative with a daily rapid NAAT test or antigen test for 7 days after being identified as a close contact with possible exposure to COVID-19, if the student's parent or legal guardian provides consent. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution shall be transmitted to our local boards of education throughout the Erie and Niagara region, the Erie County Department of Health, Governor Hochul, New York State Department of Health, New York State Board of Regents, and all New York State and federal legislators representing the students and family of the Williamsville school community.
Thank you, Ms. Kazmarek-Bogner, for reading that for us. May I have a motion to resolve and approve the Test to Stay resolution for the Williamsville Central School District as read by Ms. Kazmarek-Bogner and presented in board docs? Dr. Littman, thank you. Dr. McCleary, second. Is there any discussion on this? Dr. Littman?
I was going to say is highly valuable and is something I think we've all can agree on is important to our students and to our community so that the academic achievement can continue as we follow the guidelines mandated by the government as such.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, all in favor on this resolution? Any opposing or abstaining? Okay, all hands up equals this motion carried unanimously. So board members, I will ask that you stay and sign it before you leave today, okay? Thank you very much. All right, we are moving on to the superintendent's report. So I conclude my report, and Dr. Brownhall, I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, President Leatherborough. We're going to discuss health and safety first. So as many of you know, as many of our community members know, that in partnership with ECDOH, the Erie County Department of Health, the district is hosting an on-site vaccination clinic for students ages 5 to 11. So that clinic will be held on this coming Friday, December 17th, from 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock p.m. Parents and guardians must accompany their children. And for parents and guardians, booster doses will be available upon request when you walk in, when you bring your child. So if you are a parent and you need a booster dose, you are able to get that also this Friday from 3 to 7 p.m. if you've already registered. We were only allotted at this time 200 slots, and all of those slots are taken up. We are always in consultation with ECDOH to try to schedule a second vaccination clinic. But this one will be going on this Friday, and we're very happy to offer it to our students and families. I want to give an update on strategic planning. I want to congratulate and thank the parents that submitted letters to be on strategic planning. We have 7 parents that will be joining the strategic planning committee. Now, to get them up to date, myself and Assistant Superintendent Dr. Balin will be meeting with them tomorrow at 4:00 p.m. to bring them up to date. So we've done a lot of strategic planning work, and we don't want them to feel like they're behind. So we're going to do a mini orientation, if you will, to bring them up to date. And our next strategic planning meetings are scheduled for Monday, December 20th. So that's next Monday, and Monday, January 24th from 2:00 to 4:00 p.m. So all of the parents that submitted letters, we wanted to make sure that they can attend both those strategic planning meetings and the orientation tomorrow, and they all agreed they can attend. So we're very excited about that. And we're going to continue to work on goal statements and goal activities. Now, after these meetings, we will then be transitioning to developing committees at the school level, and that will be an additional opportunity for parents to be on those committees at their schools also. So this is something that you just discussed, President Leatherborough, academic supports. And there are a lot of supports available to our students district-wide. You remember at the November Board of Education meeting, Assistant Superintendent Balin did talk about the wide range of academic supports available for students. And in one of my weekly updates, I also mentioned it, and then we showed the clip of what Dr. Balin was talking about. I want to encourage all families and especially students that advocate for themselves at the high school to make sure you're talking with your teachers. If you're having difficulty, if you need assistance, your teacher is your first point of contact, because then your teacher is able to also let you know what supports are available. So if you're not familiar with Math Lab, or if you're not familiar with some of the other supports, your teacher or your counselor is able to direct you appropriately to what supports would be advantageous for you to either get back on track, to advance a little, or to receive some remediation. Another thing you mentioned, President Leatherborough, was the New York State Education Department graduation measures. So NYSEC sent us a memo, and it was sent to all school districts in November regarding a review of graduation requirements and requesting feedback from stakeholders statewide. So the reason that meeting is so important on the 27th from 2:00 to 4:30 is because it's our regional meeting, and I know Superintendent Lynn Fusco from Erie-Wombosis will be running a large portion of the meeting, and it's really to get feedback from the stakeholders about what graduation measures mean, what they should mean, and what changes would we suggest or recommend for consideration from the Board of Regents for the future. And so that's why that meeting is important. So information on how to register was shared through Wix and the district website. So please refer to both Wix or the district's website if you are interested in registering. And the state, at one of our meetings, the state said they really want families, students especially, and teachers, educators to really think outside of the box, right? So that we're providing multiple means for students to reach graduation. So this meeting is very important. And I know Vice President Van Sice will be attending also, so thank you for that. Some reminders for the new year: opportunities for parental involvement in strategic planning committees at the school level will be communicated. Our next Board of Education meeting is Tuesday, January 11th at 7 p.m. And the community forum is March 22nd following the budget work session. So I know President Leatherborough has explained this in her presidential update, but I wanted to also, in my superintendent's update, just put an exclamation point behind some of these. We want to remind everyone that winter recess is December 24th through January 2nd. Classes will resume on Monday, January 3rd, 2022. And that is it for the community update. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Brownhall. Does anyone from the board have any questions or comments regarding that update? All right.
There are two other items.
Sure.
11B is the 21-22 staffing and class size report. So that is available in board docs. So you can see it's really important also, because I know the board has guidelines for class sizing, and you will see that we are in adherence in all of our classrooms. Also, 11C is important because you just heard the presentation from Dr. Grossman from the RED group, and that information is used by Dr. McKenna to begin the staffing projections and the report that is submitted in board docs for the 2022-2023 school year. So that work begins very early so that once budget season comes around, we can marry the two, the budget and the required staffing, so that we have proper supports and staffing in our schools. So thank you, Dr. McKenna, for that also. Dr. Beaker.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment really on items B and C combined. The report in B was really reassuring to me in looking at those class size guidelines. If you look at those sections, they're all falling underneath the class size guidelines, which is great. Coupling that with the staffing projection report, I think that in the budget development that's coming, considering staff projections, it's an opportunity for our district to revisit those class size guidelines for grades 3 and 4. This is something in the past that we've heard from families. I personally think looking at those, the report in B, we see that just the average class size is really below where our current class size guideline is. And of course, we saw the report, we know that these numbers fluctuate. I also think it's important to think about what our 3rd and 4th grade look like. Right now, our 3rd graders that are going to be 4th graders next year, the last full year of school they had was kindergarten. And our 2nd graders coming up to 3rd grade have never had a full year of school in school as we consider it normal, right? This has impacts on what school looks like in these elementary classrooms, and has impacts academically, but also on social, emotional, and behavior. And I think if you had conversations with educators in these grade levels, 3rd and 4th grade looks a lot different this year than ever before. So I just wanted to comment on that as an opportunity as we're working through budget development to see if there's any room in there in our budget to consider lowering some of those class size guidelines for grades 3 and 4.
Thank you for that. And it's something that we would have to examine. And that will go along with the conversation we're going to have about capacity in the buildings, right?
Absolutely.
Because once we lower class size, if we have to have another class, where would we put them? Right?
Great question.
Making sure that we have all students in a suitable classroom, right? And so that's why it all goes together. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And I understand that that's easier said than done, and that has been a hindrance in the past of making that move, but thought it was worth mentioning just looking at the reports. So thank you.
Absolutely. Oh, no, absolutely.
I have brought this up before. When we first saw this report, I think it was maybe in August or September.
The preliminary one.
The preliminary.
September,
Okay.
right after school started. Correct.
So I brought to the attention of the board and to you, Dr. Brown Hall, I'm going to advocate for Casey Middle School. When you look at Casey, their numbers are high. So they're looking at 5th grade with a class average of 26, and the 6th grade at a class average of 28.3. They are higher than any other. And when you look at it, they have more students and the fewest number of teachers compared to any other middle school. So if you scroll down, you continue to see that the number of students is decreased, and some schools have 7 teachers, some even have 10 teachers. So for Casey to hold 156 students and 170 with the 5th and 6th grade respectively, with 6 teachers only sitting at 26 and 28, I would just like to revisit that to just make it more balanced compared to the other middle schools, as well as 28 is a lot in a class. And both of my children have gone through Casey. They have both been in classes of 28. They're resilient. Children don't have a major issue with it. But just for the balance factor, when you really look at the other middle schools compared to the number of students and the teachers allocated,
Okay.
that's just something I'd like to bring to the attention
Thank
of
you very
everyone
much.
again.
Any other questions or comments from the board regarding the staffing or class size projections? Okay, so that leads us to a decision we need to make regarding the open enrollment question. So, what was recommended to the board was that we consider approving for open enrollment Dodge Elementary, Forest Elementary, Casey Middle School, High Middle School, East High School, North High School, and South High School. So it's all 3 high schools. It's 2 of the middle schools, Casey and Heim, and it's 2 of the elementary schools, Dodge and Forest. So we've heard some discussion about rationale for why we might want to table this. So I want to check with the board to see right now if there's anyone that would like to make a motion to table agenda item 11D at this time, or if there is the opposite of just going through with it and bringing it to a vote. Dr. Littman.
I'd like to make a motion to table 11D until we gather some additional data.
Okay, there's a motion on the table to table 11D. Is there a second on that motion? Dr. McCleary, thank you. Is there any additional discussion? I think we've kind of said it all. Dr. Littman, did you want to add anything?
No, I just wanted to, I haven't seen the data, how many students have taken advantage of open enrollment most recently. So we have some numbers in our mind to work with, I think.
And,
I may have missed those somewhere.
and are there specific criteria for application to open enrollment or?
That's a good question. The question, Dr. Brownhall, is there specific criteria for being considered for open enrollment?
Timetables.
No. You know what? I shouldn't be so quick to answer. I'll defer to Assistant Superintendent Scanzuzo. Is there any special criteria that if a family wants to open enroll at a school and they're listed as an open enrollment school, is there any special criteria they must meet? Right.
Okay.
June 1st.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other additional comments of Ms. Kismerick-Bogner? Thank you.
So my understanding is we're going to get some additional information so that we are sure that whatever open enrollment schools are on the list, that they have the capacity for the open enrollment.
Correct.
Do you have a sense of when we will likely be able to get that information?
I would say January, February at the latest.
Okay, thank you very much.
On the motion to table 11D, which is the resolution for open enrollment, all in favor? All right, motion carries unanimously. So we are tabling 11D. We'll bring that back either January or February after we get some additional information. So let's take a look at our policies that are up for first reading. Many of these, if not all of them, I think all of them, are a result of the committee work that myself, Dr. Littman, and Board Parliamentarian Kasmerick-Bogner have been a part of. We've had 4 planning sessions to do the work on all of the policies that exist in our bylaws. Is there a motion for the first reading of policy updates from the 1000 series policy committee meetings for following policy numbers? 1230, resignation and dismissal. 1337, duties of the school attorneys. 1530, minutes. 1540, executive sessions. 1610, annual district meeting and election budget vote. And 1650, submission of questions and propositions at annual elections and special district meetings as presented. Is there a motion to accept the first reading of these policies? Ms. Beeger, thank you. Ms. Kasmerick-Bogner, second. Again, this is just a first reading, and our district clerk, Mrs. Carey, I want to thank you for all of the work that you've done through BOCES to get all of the updates. We have like a list of questions for Mrs. Carey every single time, and she within a day would email us back all the answers.
Absolutely.
Did I already get motions on these two? I did, thank you. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor of approving the first reading? Thank you. Anyone in opposition? Nope, motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item 12. Oh, I'm sorry. We tabled the motion. Thank you. So the motion didn't carry. The motion was tabled. Or the.
Just did the first reading.
Oh, I see what you're
Right.
saying. Gotcha. So we're going to bring it back in January. So is there a motion to table these policies for a second reading and adoption at the January meeting? I've only done this a million times. Ms. Cullen, thank you. Mr. Viscalia, was that a second? Thank you very much. All in favor of tabling the motion on the policies? Thank you. All in favor? That was everybody's hands up, so that passes. All right, so now we're looking at the annual claims auditor report. Dr. Brown Hall or Mr. Matursky, do you wish to add anything about this? I do see it's in board docs for us.
It is on board docs, and I don't think, Mr. Matursky, I don't think there's anything to add for that one, correct?
Now, the information, I think, is relevant and speaks to what was done this past year.
Thank you.
Does anyone from the board have a question or comment from Mr. Matursky on that work? Okay, thank you. 12B, the long-range financial plan applicable to the 2022-2023 budget development cycle. So Dr. Brown Hall, I turn it over to you and Mr. Matursky to present this plan.
Absolutely. So our Chief Financial Officer, Assistant Superintendent, Tom Matursky, will be presenting. And welcome, Mr. Matursky. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Brown Hall. Good evening, everyone. The December meeting is when we move forward with the next phase of our budget development process, and that's a review of our long-range plan. The information is really a summary of what the written plan is in your board docs for this meeting. And the objective of the plan is to provide information on what the financial outlook would be over the next 5 years. It's based on a point in time, but it's based upon actual information, historical information, and what we're seeing in the economy and items that would influence our budget. So with that said, I want to provide some information that really is more for our community. Our board is much aware of this, but one of the things that is unique and a little bit different for school districts, public school districts in particular, is that although we have to have a balanced budget, as do municipalities, we also have, of course, our budget vote, and that's voted on by our community. The municipalities just allow their boards to approve the budget. So that's the difference, as well as we have a lot of more stringent reporting measures, such as budget notices, tax cap compliance, as well as property tax caps. So all of that information factors into what we do as we develop our budget. And then again, more of an information item for our community, the tax cap that we all hear about is many times advertised as a 2% tax cap. The reality is that there really is no levy level amount of an increase. There are laws that pertain to that, which are if you exceed the tax cap calculation, then you need a 60% majority approval of your budget. And if you have 2 budget defeats, you cannot increase your levy at all. It's a 0% increase. It goes back to the prior year. So those are the really major factors that impact our budget development process as we look forward. And the possibility with inflation, what it is, that 2% factor, that's the limit on the consumer price index, CPI, that will become a factor this year and possibly in the next few years. To go a little bit of background here as we look at the long-range plan, I wanted to revisit what our notable revenues were. And specifically, you can see that really they're composed of 3 items. You have our New York State aid, which is about 23.26% of our budget, and this is our current budget. Sales tax receipts represent 5.15%, and then you have these small items, interest earnings, less than 0.2%, Medicaid, 0.7%, and then you also have our tax levy, which is about 65.26%. On the other side, you're seeing that we really don't have a lot of other revenues. So all those other items are so minor that we really are targeted into those three main items as we go through our revenue process for the next year's budget. Looking at some historical information, this chart really shows two major items I want to focus in on. The first thing is those prior 2 years. You can see in the prior 2 years, our state aid was really relatively minimal. The other thing to factor in here is that we were always under the tax cap. This district has always had a budget under the tax cap, very close to it, but under it. The other thing you'll notice in those other prior 2 years is that the actual expense increase was higher than the levy increase and the state aid. So what did we do? We had to make some reductions to balance our budgets. This past year has been totally different. You see that we had a $5.8 million increase, followed by a tax cap amount of $3,382,572, and then our actual levy increase was $3,375,000. Having said that, we actually got $2.2 million in state aid, and yet we had a $2.8 million deficit. So how did that happen? If you think about it, you're adding your state aid, you're adding your levy increase, it almost equals that 5.8. The reason is, if you remember last year, we had to reduce a lot of the other revenues, sales tax, all of the COVID-related items went down. So that's something to keep in mind as you look forward, because those items, as the economy comes back, will be able to support our budget in the future. And that's a positive item. So lastly, you see the $3,036,162 on this chart. That is the amount of federal aid that we allocated in this current year's budget. So looking at the long-range forecast, what I have done is broken this down for presentation purposes to a couple major items. In regard to state aid, you can see that the first year includes a $2 million in federal aid in that number. The second year includes $1 million. And then in the third and fourth year here, you're seeing that there is no additional federal aid. So it could happen, it could be extended, there could be new federal aid programs, but we do not know that. We don't have that information. So at this point in time, we're projecting with what we know. So the point here that you're seeing is there's a dollar change of $222,000 in the first year, 0.55%. And what I'm doing is I'm adding basically a 2% increase on foundation aid. And I also do consider the categorical aid decreases that might occur if we have student reductions. However, those are really relatively minor compared to the other major aids that we have: foundation aid, transportation aid, student services, and special ed. Those items are all our major aids, including BOCES. So as we move forward to that, you're seeing that there's a bit of a reduction in aid in 23-24. That's due to the fact that, again, I'm subtracting $1 million from federal aid, and then you're seeing another reduction in 24-25, because that's when that last million goes away, and then you're seeing an increase. Now, can we receive more dollars? May we receive more foundation aid? It's definitely possible, but again, right now we don't have the state's budget, so that is what's being projected. On the tax levy, each year I keep it in the forecast at 2% for the actual CPI rate. That's the maximum. And I'm also keeping our assessment growth at 2%. So you're seeing that, again, tax cap 2%, what I mentioned earlier, the actual net changes, if you go through the formulas, and the increases are actually a little bit more than 2%, they're closer to 3%. But that, again, is a reasonable expectation for what we currently know and what we currently have seen in the past. Looking at the expenditure side, the notable expenses, salaries, as we would expect, they're the highest amount, 57.14%, benefits 18.89%, utilities 1.71%, instructional contractual. So these are all the services that support our instructional programs. In the budget, they're listed as a 400 code. They're only at 6.49%. Supplies, 0.08%. So very, very small when it comes to our total budget. Equipment, 1.16%. transportation 4.19, and debt service 2.37. So again, when you look at all those, the big numbers are really salary and benefits. And then again, I represent 76% total salary and benefits of the budget. Athletic budget, many times we get questions about that. 1.8 million of a $205 million budget. BOCES budget is about 9 million, and that's aided at about 59%. And then most importantly, when you look at the breakdown between program, capital, and administrative, you see what you want to see. You see program component at 77.17%, administrative 8.39%. I'm not going to go over this. I think if you have some time to review this, it's really a really good history on what's happened salary and benefits. The key items to note is how there's been a change between the percentage for salaries as opposed to the percentage for benefits of the total budget, how that shifted. And the last thing I'll say on that is that actually that shift is going to start reversing again. So we went from salaries to benefits increasing, then we went from benefits starting to decrease and salary percent increase. I think with what we're foreseeing in the health insurance industry, our health insurance expenses are going to be going up over the next year, and I think you're going to start to see that benefit amount climb above salaries. So looking at the major part of our budget, what this forecast does, it provides a 3% increase in each year for salaries. But I need to make a specific comment on that. That's inclusive of all step increases. It's not on top of step. And that's critical to understanding this. And remember, when we look at the next slide that shows the totals and what the reduction process is, that's what we have to be aware of. New York State retirement system, pretty much a 1.8 is pretty close to what we're probably going to see this year. And by this year, I mean next year's budget. And 1% is a forecast. Health insurance, 5%. That's what we're going to see this year. 6% the future. That might be a little bit low, but again, based upon what we know today, that's a good percentage. And then Social Security is based upon increasing salaries. Facilities, in these forecasts over the last few years, I have never increased the other expenses, the facilities, the supplies, all of those, because we've been able to manage them, reallocate within our budget. But I see inflation being something that will not allow that to happen. So there's actually percent increases put in there for the facility budget. That's necessary for our cleaning supplies and all the other items, paper products, all those items that you never really think about, but are important to maintaining our school buildings. Contracted transportation, the 2% are applicable to New York State Education Department tells us what the consumer price index amount is on an annual basis. That's applied to our contract. The last year, 25-26, that would be the first year of what we're hopeful will be an extension, a new extension, but we're going to have a pretty sizable increase due to what we've experienced in COVID, what we're experiencing in higher wages for bus drivers. Although we don't technically pay the drivers, our contractor has increased their wages over the last 2 years significantly. And that's why we don't have major busing issues here. So looking at the details on the long-range forecast, you can see that this is really separated. This is a summary that just shows the total amounts. Revenue is on top. It's showing all those items I kind of summarized already. Expenses are on the bottom. So again, I'll just stick to the key factors here. The current year, you're seeing a surplus of 1.5 million. You're seeing no reductions. And then you start to see some deficits. So why in the world would we have a surplus and not increase the expense budget? Well, if you remember, we have that outstanding federal aid. So the goal has always been you do an implementation timeline. You take some savings from 1 year, you hold them, you reallocate them to the next year, and then that smooths the reduction necessary. And that's what you're seeing here. You're seeing that in the 23-24 year, you're able to have a minimal amount of reductions based upon the forecast. And then in 24-25, you've got a little bit larger, 2.3 and then 2.9, but those are actually pretty manageable when you consider what we've experienced historically. The only other item I'll mention is where it says current year surplus reductions. That's the comprehensive compounded amount. The amount where it says yearly is the amount that you would have to make in a given year. So in summary, what we want to make sure we all understand here, but our community is aware, as well as our legislators, is that we really have an importance for our New York State aid. That is so important to the structure of our budget. Next, you know, the COVID and the awareness that federal aid is likely to go away. Right now, it's planned to go away in the 23-24 year, but it could be extended, but right now we have to plan for what we know. And then, of course, the impact of labor contract settlements on our budget, the compounding effect that has, and then lastly, the big item we all experience on a daily basis is what inflation will do. We've never experienced this. I think what I heard the other day is through November, we're at 6.2% inflation this year. That's higher than we've ever had, I think they said, since 1982. So now just transitioning, I do a little bit on reserves here, and the reserves I'm concentrating on are those that are appropriated in our budget. This is a compacted presentation here. If you look in your packet, there's the other years are actually there. I only want to address two items on this slide. The first is that you see under that first very column, it's 21-22. That's what we have appropriated in this year's revenue budget. And then if you look to 25-26, that same budget, it's the exact same amount. So the idea is we're not going to make any adjustments to our reserve appropriations in our revenue budget. We're going to keep it stable. What you do see the difference is in your reserve balances, 38.7 million as of 2022, which is the projection, and then 35.6. So basically about a $1.6 million reduction. And so that's us using our reserves as necessary. And that's how we manage it. In regard to our reserves, the main thing you want to be aware of is that some of them are self-funding, such as unemployment and workers' compensation. So you do not want those levels to drop significantly. You always want to go back to your third party and make sure that the third party has provided you with some facts on what you need to keep in those reserves, and those are the amounts you fund them by. So that said, you don't want to deplete your reserves either. The major part of the reserves is that although the controller may say that you have too much, they positively impact our debt borrowing. We have a lot of capital projects currently underway, currently finishing, and some that might be approved in the very near future. And our AA1 bond rating is probably the best in this area, and we want to maintain that. That provides us the very best debt service and lowest interest rates that we see. So just to summarize the final items here, this is kind of just a quick brief review of what we're looking at in the near future. So we'll be doing budget requests and going through our ESSER 2, GEAR 2, and ARP programs. We've been keeping you updated on that. We have some approvals where we are monitoring the use of them. We are using a multi-budgeted, multi-year plan for those grant funds so that we're doing that appropriately. We're going to begin our budget development for BOCES. That's more toward the end of January. We'll be getting some information from the state, hopefully in mid-January, on the state aid that we'll receive. That will be factored into probably our first budget review that will be expense minus revenue. And then, going toward our budget position and the state aid run, and then some initial tax cap calculations in February with the submission happening prior to March 1st. And then that would conclude, which is quite a while from here, but March is our preliminary 22-23 budget presentation. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms.
Thank you, Mr. Maturski.
Are there any questions by the board? Dr. Singh.
I just had two questions, but it's probably because I don't understand as I should. In your slide 7, you mentioned an increase in tax levy. Does it also take into effect that now the assessments are coming in and most assessments are way higher than they used to be? So that would increase in the tax increase.
Yeah, the assessments really don't factor into our levy. The Board of Education's, they provide, your role is to assign the levy amount.
Mhm.
The town of Amherst Assessor's Office is dealing with all the changes in assessed values. So when I calculate the actual tax rate in August that the board approves, if there's a higher amount of assessments, it actually drives the actual tax rate down. So if you had no change in your in your assessed value for your home, and we say that the actual tax rate goes up 2%, that's the only amount that your bill will go up regardless. If your assessed value goes up, but everyone's assessed value goes up, and the levy never changes. That's basically what the board and the community approved in May. Your actual bill, if the other amounts of assessments go up higher than yours, could actually go down. So it's a function, it's a very complicated function, but it's a function of the total assessments on the town and everybody's individual assessed value.
So would there be a dollar increase if assessment goes up, or not as a percentage of the dollar value?
It's your assessed value on your home. If it rises, you're going to be paying based upon what the tax rate will be for that year. The best way that I explain it when someone contacts me with their tax bill is I ask them to take out last year's tax bill and this year's.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, what's your assessed value? And we compare it. And then most of the concerns are, well, you said my tax bill was going to go up 2%, basically, when you do your budget and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And mine went up 4%. And I say, well, what happened to your assessed value? And if it went up $50,000, that means that you've got that increase that you have to pay on the full tax rate amount. And that's why your tax bills may go up more. But what I'm saying is that that's one function of the whole formula. Because if you went up just, let's say that your assessment went up 4%, but the town's total assessment goes up 10%, you're actually not going to, you're going to have some of that absorbed, and it's going to be lower. That's why I say it's a very complicated formula.
Okay, so the net effect is if all the assessments go up, would the school get any additional?
No, we do not get more.
Okay.
Yeah, that does not. That's part of the tax cap law. So, and just one more thing that assures you that that cannot happen is when we file our tax levy in April, I have to file it with the New York State Controller's Office. We have to refile again in June, and they come back and they say, okay, what's your actual levy going to be? So they're double checking. And then actually there's a third check that I get the following year that they say, now here's what we got from New York State real property taxes. I have to physically sign it and send it back to Albany saying that, yes, that's correct. So you cannot increase the levy. Once it's set by the community and the board, that's all it can be. It can't go up at all.
The other question I had is, now that inflation is going up, it's like you said, it's over 6%. Will it affect the CPI in your calculations?
The CPI is part of the tax cap calculation, but that's where it's limited to 2% unless the law will change.
Okay. And the last question, you mentioned in the 2023, we have a surplus.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean we won't increase the tax?
No, that's including a regular levy increase at that level that I said, 2% on CPI, which is maximum, and 2% on assessment growth. Now, keep in mind that I'm using what I consider to be realistic numbers, but over the time, the growth of assessments from especially the town of Amherst has exceeded my conservative 2%. So you're probably going to have a little bit higher levy, because what's going to happen is Amherst might come in at 4% or 5%. And if Amherst does a reevaluation, which I hear they're talking about, that changes everything. The rate will probably drop dollars, because again, that what I described earlier, it's the complex formula that assessments go up and that, but it will drop down. And this has happened once before here. I'd have to go back, but I think it's about 8 years ago, where Amherst reevaluated, and we saw our tax rate go down by about $3 in that year. And in that particular year, I kept the tax rate at 0%. Well, actually, the tax levy at 0%. And the reason for that was because we knew we were going to get all the questions on the tax bills, and we said, well, we didn't change it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the board? Mrs. Beeger?
Yeah, thank you so much for your report. I was interested in slide 9, where you showed the historical data about how much the percentage that the budget has been a salary and the benefits. And you mentioned, you used the words "as we would expect." It was about 76% of our most recent budget. I actually found it really interesting, the historical data, that it was high, like in 2013-14, it was over 80% of our budget. So I found that interesting. My question to you is, 76%, is that a normal percent of budget that is spent on salary and benefits, comparable to other districts in the region, and you've seen, is that really a normal percentage for salary benefits?
It really is. It's in the 70% area. Some might be 65, up to 75, but definitely it's not uncommon.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Vice President Van Sice?
Thank you, Mr. Matursky. I have one quick question. I see that the supplies is like 0.06% or so, 0.08, whatever that might be. Just a question, I guess clarification. We are hearing that there is a paper shortage here in Williamsville, and teachers aren't able to have paper. Is this allocating money for the supplies? Is this due to COVID impact with not being able to get it from our supplier?
Correct.
What's the shortage? And is it budget related or anything for clarification?
Yes, great question. It's not budget related at all. It is a supplier issue, but I can provide a little bit of good news that we worked out a trailer truck type purchase. And so with that, we should be pretty good in paper in the upcoming months. And I think we're going to be okay for the rest of the year based upon some strategies we put in. So we still think that, again, we didn't have this information last week. It was something that we were working on. So we want to be truthful with everybody, and we shared the information with our principals, and that we wanted to make sure people were prioritizing what they were using the paper for, because we were having delivery issues, and technically there still are. But that's what we've been able to do, and it's not budget related at all.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just have one quick question. We spent a lot of time tonight looking at enrollment data, and we do see that over time there's a projection of a decrease. What impact will that have financially on our district to have, because we're talking about long-term planning. So with that, if we expect a decrease in enrollment over the long term, what would the effect be?
I'll just go over, I'll start with the revenue side. On the revenue side, the impact of lower enrollment will have somewhat of a reduction effect on state aid. But as I said, I don't believe it's going to be as significant, because although enrollment is an important factor, the other factors are just as important. You have what are your wealth ratios? What are all the formulas? And believe it or not, Williamsville is not considered per SED an extremely wealthy district. We're very close to 1.0, and 1.0 is average. So when you consider all of that, that's where we are sitting. So we're not going to be negatively impacted by that. When we're looking at other revenues, they're not impacted at all by enrollment. Sales tax, There's a little bit on sales tax, but remember, if our enrollment's dropping, that's allocated by the county based upon enrollment and some other factors. Every other school district's enrollment is dropping. So ours is dropping less than theirs. So there should not be any impact to sales tax revenue allocation to us. And then again, all those other revenues, maybe special education might be impacted if those students decrease, but it could go up. So revenue side is pretty stable is what my message would be. On the expenditure side, I would say that technically, if I know you've talked about decreasing class sizes and having smaller class sizes, but you would have an opportunity to reevaluate your staffing model and see what's out there. And again, that's for your discussion and for future discussions. But that's, as we said, staffing and benefits, salary and benefits, that's the major portion of our budget. So that would be the area that you would have to take a look at and say, do you want to continue to keep those staffing models in place?
Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you for all the detail and information you provided tonight.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to combine agenda items 12C and 12D. May I have a motion to resolve to approve the property tax settlements in 12C and 12D as presented? Sure, thank you. May I have a second? Dr. Singh, thank you very much. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed or abstentions? Motion carried unanimously. Item 13 is our liaison reports. If any one needs a substitute for an assignment, please let us know. Does anyone have awareness of that here at the table? All right, all of the reports are in board docs. There's no legislative matters to discuss other than the ones we've already talked about related to test to stay, and just encouraging you to fill out one of the thank you cards before you leave tonight. Under curriculum, which is item 15A, may I have a motion to resolve to approve the curriculum council recommendations as presented? Ms. Kasmerick-Bogner, thank you. Ms. Poland, second. Is there any discussion? Thank you, Dr. Balin, for all the work on this. Very detailed. Appreciate it. All in favor? Opposed or abstention? None. Motion carries unanimously. No items under item 16, personnel. Item 17A, information is in board docs regarding facility improvement and preservation. Are there any questions for Mr. Matursky regarding the information in 17A? He's already spoken quite a bit, so we won't make him come back up to the podium. I'm going to also combine 17B and 17C. May I please have a motion to resolve and approve agenda item 17B, capital project bids pertaining to the district-wide security improvement project, and 17C, the State Environmental Quality Review Act, district-wide school building air conditioning capital project as presented. Thank you, Mr. Biscaglia. Mrs. Beeger, second. Is there any discussion on either of these items? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. Opposed or abstentions? Motion carried unanimously. There are no items for 18, which is our special needs and student activities. Are there any matters to discuss under committee of the whole? Dr. Singh?
I just have a request. Is it possible for a school board to write a letter to the town asking them to opt out of the marijuana, recreational marijuana, which is going to be active from January 1st?
I am really sorry. The air blower is like blowing right over your head. So I heard letter to the county, but I didn't hear regarding what.
Like the town of Amherst is going to start selling recreational marijuana from January 1st. And December 31st is the last day to opt out of that. And the village of Williamsville has decided to opt out, and some other towns like West Seneca have already opted out. is it possible to write a letter or to request the town to consider opting out?
Dr. Singh is asking if the board is interested in sending a letter asking the county to opt out of the recreational marijuana, the stores, right? Like, okay. Did you want to, well, first of all, any discussion on that for Dr. Singh? Van Zeiss?
I just would like to ask Dr. Brown Hall if that's appropriate, that the board would even intervene or make that request.
That's a good question. I guess the question really is when you start doing something like that, are you going to take a position on anything the town does, right? So I guess when you start thinking about that, and I know one of the questions that was asked and provided information about, any marijuana shop has to be 500 feet away from school buildings, and that's very important that we realize that. Now, taking that further, or having the district write a letter, I mean, that's something you really want to get a feel of, everyone on the board, but I don't know that you want to start jumping to that, because then you're going to start imposing yourself on anything the town, starts making decisions about. And so I guess that's where the discussion needs to be at.
Yeah, I personally don't want to weigh in on that decision. I feel like that's a decision for the town. But that's my personal view. But Dr. Lippman, I see you have your
I was
hand
going
up.
to say it might be interesting to see if Amherst schools or Sweet Home schools, which are also part of the, Amherst, has done anything or is considering that type of action. Because maybe a joint, if we decide,
Are you offering to
I'm sorry,
look into that for us?
maybe some kind of resolution with all the schools may be something.
Are you offering to look into that for us, Dr. Lippman?
Say that, I'm sorry.
Are you offering to look into that for us and present back to us? Okay.
And that might be an option, just have to, discuss with other board presidents if that is an issue that.
Yeah, I can tell you it hasn't come up at the Erie County Association of School Board meetings. Like, I'm on the legislative team. It has not come up for discussion at that meeting. And I don't know, Dr. McCleary, if it's come up for you at all.
And the delegate?
Yeah, at the delegate meetings.
No.
It hasn't. Okay, Mr. Biscaglia.
I even if it was looked into by Dr. Lippman, I don't foresee my personal view would be not writing anything. I think sometimes you kind of have to stay in your lane. There's benefits and there's negative things to it. We were just talking about sales revenue and things like that. So, you have to, that's a town and county, and that's how I feel. So.
The thing is, if you don't opt out by December 31st, the town loses the option to opt out ever.
Right. I do understand that. Are you looking to make a motion at the table right now? And because we did have a little bit of discussion, I don't know.
I kind of agree with Dr. Littman that we can look around and see what other school districts are doing, and maybe have a joint resolution if they all are in the same boat.
Yeah, no, I absolutely invite you or Dr. Lippman to do that and present back to us. And you can use email, district email, for information sharing. So you're welcome to look into it, and as early as next week, report back to us what you found out. Okay. All right. Any other items, Dr. McCleary?
Just a quick question on that, of looking into this and then reporting back and so forth. Our next meeting is not until January 13th.
Right.
The town's decision has to be by December 31st or whenever their last meeting of this month. I don't know when the town board meeting is in December.
I absolutely hear you on that. I think we just had a little period of discussion, and just sort of, my perception of that is that there wasn't board support for intervening. I don't know if I'm reading the board wrong, but that was just my perception of what transpired.
I'm just saying time-wise.
Yeah.
It's not going to.
Well, if there were support, there's always the option to call a special meeting. But it doesn't appear that there is support for something like that at this time. And I think, I think board members might be hesitant of giving their personal views on recreational marijuana, and I respect that. Dr. Littman, followed by Mrs.
I
Beeger.
was just going to say the other option is in any situation, individual, members of the community or individual members of the board can write or call the elected representatives in Amherst and express their viewpoints.
Yeah,
Just like
An individual.
As an
Individual, not a board
That's
member,
really
yeah.
important that you do that, because if you attach your name and say, if I were to write Town of Amherst and sign off as President Leatherbarrow, I wasn't authorized by the board to do that.
Yeah.
We just want to make sure that it's if you do it as a
Individual
private
people.
citizen,
Yes.
it's completely separate. And our board policy states that you identify that you are a board member, but that you're speaking as an individual. Okay. Any further discussion on that?
You were talking about, reading the vibe of the board. I want to kind of piggyback on what Mr. Biscaglia was saying about staying in our lane.
You just talk in the microphone a little bit better.
Sure.
That thing is so loud.
Oh, well, my microphone is
Oh,
off.
there you are.
Maybe that's why. Just piggybacking on what Mr. Biscaglia said about staying in our own lane. I think that we want to be careful in setting a precedent and taking a stance as a board for town actions. When something happens, such as the resolution we passed tonight about test to stay, that's very specific. That's something that impacts our children at school, and we're looking to advocate for something that impacts whether they can be physically present in the school. So, we all, I'm sure, have differing personal opinions on different topics, but if we're going to advocate in that way, especially for the town, for me, I feel like we need to be careful about what line we draw, particularly when it might be a social issue that people have differing opinions on.
Thank you. Well said. All right. Does that matter set? All right. Under correspondence, we did receive a few emails regarding masking protocols. Still, some people in favor of the masking, some people are not so much. We did receive a letter from a group of teachers advocating for increased school nurse pay. There was an email from a parent asking questions about how schools decide notifications for illnesses in the classroom. And we also had a question from a parent, or a concern from a parent, about running the swim program during COVID. And that parent was offered an alternate assignment during the PE time for their child. Any other issues or examples of correspondence that anyone wants to discuss? All right, thank you. Well, with that, we wish to extend holiday wishes of good health and peace to all as we close out 2021 and begin a new year. Our next scheduled board meeting is January 11th. I just want to remind board members if they would please sign the resolution before you leave, and also just take 3 to 5 minutes to fill out a postcard. That would be greatly appreciated. Is there a motion to adjourn the regular board meeting? Mrs. Peeger, thank you, and Dr. Singh, second. All in favor? All hands up equals everybody. Thank you, everyone. Good night and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.